Hey Melanie, how are you?
Hello, Kevin. How are you today?
I am doing well. Thank you so much for making time for me in the audience today. We really appreciate
That's my great pleasure.
it. Well, my first question for you, Melanie, is are there more visitors and tourists in the Montana area after the big Yellowstone show has premiered?
Uh, I don't think so, but the difference is that they all say, "Hey, isn't this where Yellowstone is made?" Or "Where's Kevin Costner?" "Where's
I would imagine those questions come up. I mean, after I watched the show, I was like, I had already wanted to get to Montana. I mean, of course, because of its beauty, but after seeing it on the screen like that, and I mean, my wife and I definitely need to make a trip out. It just looks serene, I guess is the word.
Rick?" There really aren't a lot of words for it. It's just beautiful and calm and peaceful and wonderful.
That's awesome. Are you a native? Are you from there?
No, I am actually from the Mojave Desert near Death Valley in California, but my parents are from here. And so eventually I made my way back or up here, and I've never been happier. I love it here.
Awesome. Well, that's really exciting. I'm glad that you made it there, because you are the founder of Stillwater Hemp. And I'm super interested to talk to you about, the landscape, the hemp culture, within Montana, the understanding of the plant and your role in that, right? I think a good place to start in this conversation is, after reviewing your background and seeing your bio, I really, what stood out to me is the fact that you have led with education in this market. It's something that's very important. A lot of people really don't understand and fully grasp the potential of cannabis right now. And um, I think what you did was create a CBD school, and you
Mhm.
launched that for a year where you educated people. So tell us about that process, and what has led you to where you are today.
Well, CBD school happened I started it in 2018. It was so obvious that it needed to happen. There were a lot of just naive ideas or misconceptions about what CBD was and what CBD wasn't. And so I thought they, information needs to be dispersed and education needs to happen. So I began CBD school, did that for a year. I did it once a month. I went into Billings. I taught a little, just a basic what's CBD, what's the endocannabinoid system, why do we care about it, how does CBD work with it, that kind of thing. And then just this year, we've launched CBD School 2.0, and that
So
one goes.
before you get to 2.0, I want to ask you, what was the response from attendees and participants in that first year? This was probably foreign to them, right? I mean, an ECS, they're
Right.
thinking like, yeah, what was that experience like?
Yeah. Um, I it was much more well received than I expected. At the same time, I went on the radio. I went on our radio program once a month to do Q&A. I was doing that at the same time as CBD school, and so there was a huge buzz kind of going around this side of Montana about CBD and what it was and how and it the CBD school. The best part about CBD school was that I only had 12 seats available, and it was full every time. And they were very engaged. We were never out of there in less than an hour and a half. And nobody was complaining about that. Nobody was saying, "Gosh, it went on forever." Everybody was engaged and asking questions and writing things down. And then some people came back and brought friends or family members, and it was great. And it was
It's awesome.
the great way to get the word of mouth out and to get the product in people's hands so that they could try it and use it and see how great it was.
Right. And what was your relationship with cannabis or even CBD prior? I mean, are you a regular user of the or consumer of the plant? Like,
No, I mean I use a ton of CBD now. Before I moved here, when I lived in California, my husband at the time and I were in the medical cannabis space, and we were growers, and so I knew a little bit about CBD, but mostly about THC. And but then when I came to Montana, and I began to create some topicals and other sort of self-care type products. The only reason I got into CBD is because I knew that there was going to have to be something different about my stuff that made it stand out. My product needed to have some sort of a wow or a statement. It needed to make a statement. And so I thought, well, I bet you we could do CBD up here. And sure enough, I mean, at first, I was adding it and nobody really knew what it was. But once we got the education going, uh, everybody was very receptive and very interested, and it turned out to be great. And then that's all I do now. I don't even do the other stuff anymore.
Wow. Yeah, I mean, it's such a great alternative for someone who's either THC sensitive or doesn't like the psychoactive effect that, THC gives. Um, and so let's talk a little bit about, specifically the benefits of CBD and maybe some of the misconceptions that go along with them. I know athletes are using CBD, right, for inflammatory and recovery purposes. There's just so many different use cases. So tell us a little bit about what you're doing to educate the community when it comes to using CBD and maybe even dosing, for first timers.
So I have a storefront, and I also have two websites that are e-commerce sites, and we have a broad range of different types of products. Um, Usually, when somebody will come into the store, I have a pretty detailed conversation with them about, how do they know about CBD? Have they ever used it before? Why are they thinking about using it? What do they want to use it for? Stuff like that. And then we can get a really good idea of, how much they should be using. Always, if they haven't used it before, we always want to start low, obviously. And um, sometimes people will come in and say, I'm just going to use this for my dog. I'm not going to take it myself. I don't want to fail a drug test. And one of the things, that I do is we make strictly THC free products because everybody, just about everybody in our area who has a job is subject to some sort of a randomized drug test or something. So we have zero THC in our products, and there's a lot of misconception that if you use a broad spectrum distillate, that you're still going to show high. So that is something that I'm sort of working on improving the knowledge base about. I do actually test myself every week. I've never tested positive. I don't, um,
Do you
I don't.
test yourself just to like put them at ease? Are you doing that to just
I
kind of
do.
make double
I
sure?
do that just to
Yeah.
make sure and to tell people, I do test myself, but I always tell them I'm not going to guarantee that you're not going to test hot because I don't know your lifestyle and I don't know what else you're doing in your life. I'm just telling you that I take a lot of this and I use a lot of it topically, and I always show negative. Now, when I started working with with other cannabinoids like CBG and CBN, I did know that it was possible to test positive with CBN. So I did another experiment. I'm always my own lab rat, and I started taking the CBN. It was really doing great for sleep, without any psychoactive effect. However, after about 5 or 6 days, it showed hot. I was like,
Hmm.
okay, so that's true. It does. It can show a positive on there. All right. So then I went off of it and to see how long, and it took probably about the same 4 or 5 days to completely come out of there. So I've done different sort of experiments like that, and I'll talk to people about that in my store, but I don't really put it on the website or anything because I don't want anybody to, think that I'm gonna guarantee that they're gonna get a clean test.
Right. And that's responsible for you to do. I mean, you can't, I mean, for those that are listening or watching, I mean, the plant inherently has THC in it, and it uses the THC molecule as a defense mechanism. Really, it's to
Yeah.
protect itself from the UV sun rays that are coming down. And so,
Mhm.
I mean, every hemp plant does have some amount of THC in it. Of course, that's why
Correct.
we hear 0.3%, and that's kind of the standard across the federal farm bill. But yeah, I mean, I didn't realize that CBG and CBN, those other minor cannabinoids, be more prone to having, or testing positive as opposed to CBD. That's interesting.
Well,
You don't know.
CBN specifically, CBG isn't showing. CBN specifically is basically degraded THC. When THC is, goes through the decarb process or is exposed to sunlight or heat or something, it begins to degrade and it turns into CBN. One example that I was told is if you are a regular user of, say, flower or something with THC in it, and you are like find a bud in the couch, and you're like, oh yeah, I forgot we had that. Um, and you smoke it, and it makes you tired. It's because it's pretty much degraded into all CBN by then, and that is why CBN can show as a positive for THC on a drug test because it actually used to be THC, and although it has altered its chemical makeup, its molecular structure is still almost exactly the same as THC, and so it will show.
Got you. Okay. Yeah, thank you for clarifying that. I wasn't aware of that. And so I know that the CBG is like known as the mother cannabinoid, right? It's without CBG there would be no THC or CBD, right?
Or CBN or CBC or CBA or any of those.
Yeah, and I mean CBG is a fascinating one, right? Because I mean I think that some studies have shown, this is all I think I have to use the word anecdotal data, but
Mm-hmm.
like to reduce cancer cell growth. I know that that's been one huge benefit. Have you heard that?
Yes, they have been doing studies. I think one of them was at Harvard Medical, and they are showing that it is prohibiting continued growth. They call it cell proliferation. It halts the proliferation, meaning that it isn't preventing growth, but if they get it in there, um, if they get the cannabigerol in there, it stops um, growing. Uh, it stops to growing further.
Gotcha.
Um, yeah, that's been really incredible, and I give that CBG to some of my we have a few people on our list that we just send stuff to every month as a sort of a compassionate, and all of those people get CBG in their boxes. They get several items, and CBG is definitely high on the list. They get a lot of that.
Yeah. I mean, that's just one thing where you look at the federal illegality of cannabis and you're like, oh, like all the potential in terms of like really understanding this plant and all the different benefits, medicinal benefits that are tied to these molecules, these cannabinoids, right? Because we're just
Mhm.
scratching the surface. I think the last I heard that there's like over 250, uh, and I think total with including flavonoids and terpenes is like over 400 different compounds within the plant, and
Yeah,
we know of like 12 or something, or 15 or
right.
something.
And
Yeah,
we just figured out that we have a whole system within our biology that is there to interact with these compounds. It's
right.
how we just figure that out? I mean, I guess I just think it's fabulous. And since the 2018 Farm Bill, I got to say, I have never seen an industry grow and learn and put out so much information as the cannabis industry has in 4 years. I never.
I totally agree with that, Melanie. Yeah, I mean, we have to, right? I mean,
Yeah.
there's no scientific, like it's federally illegal. So the science is really not there yet in terms of like actual scientists and people in the medical community studying this thing. So a lot of the data and findings that are putting out is from the actual industry, and the people are doing great. I mean, I just love to
Yeah.
see it because it's the highest level of human ingenuity, I would say, in all aspects.
It it just is incredible. I love learning about it. I love learning about how the cannabinoids interact pharmacologically, with our bodies and with our brain chemistry, and just, for example, everybody can agree that most people are either not getting enough sleep or have a lot of stress, stressed out about everything.
Absolutely. 100%. Yeah.
And it's very likely that if you are not getting enough sleep, you are also dealing with a lot of stress and vice versa. So those people are probably all the same people. Because once you start to lose sleep and then you start to stress out and then they feed off of each other and then they just make each other bigger and you can't get momentum on them. You can't you know, tackle them so that you can be in control again. If I've had, I've dealt with a lot of my customers who all we had to do was get their sleep schedule reset,
hmm
and a lot of other things fell into place because so many things happen while we're sleeping. Um, there are growth happens when we're sleeping, actual physical growth. I have a 13-year-old son. Do you know how long he sleeps? A long time. He eats up 15 pounds of food and then he sleeps for 15 hours, and it's because he's growing. And
Right.
and when our kids go to bed at night and they wake up the next day and they're like, "Wow, I swear you're an inch taller," they probably really are an inch taller because growth happens when we're sleeping. Another thing that happens when we're sleeping is short-term memory gets transferred into long-term memory. All of the little stuff that you read that day and that you learned, it gets transferred over so that you can remember it for longer than a day or two. Um, there are anandamide gets built up in our systems throughout the day as we burn energy. It's sort of a byproduct of using energy. But the anandamide, it builds up and it kind of makes us sluggish and it makes us tired. And that anandamide is all cleaned out during deep sleep. The neurotransmitters are regenerated. There's so many things that happen during sleep. And so if all you do is get a handle of somebody's sleep so that they're sleeping well and they're getting enough a deep REM sleep every night, it can really improve their lives.
I am so glad you brought that up, Melanie. It's so relevant because I was just in New Mexico. That's where I grew up, and that's where my family still lives. And I was
Uh-huh.
talking with my cousin because my grandma lives with my parents now because she has dementia. And
Yep.
we were sitting down outside and we were talking, and we were like, "Well," she was like, "What do you think?" Was the trigger? Like, what do you think was what caused it? And she was asking all of us, and at first I said, diet was definitely a thing because she ate a lot of sweets, a lot of sugars, and I
Yeah.
think that that's a big contributor to that type of mental illness. But as I thought further on it, I was like, well, wait a second. I remember being little, she would never sleep. Like when my aunt would come visit her, they would stay up until 4, 5 a.m. I mean, she
Yeah.
never had a regular, healthy sleep pattern.
Mm-hmm.
And from what I've read and what I've heard, and you can probably attest to this because you know a lot more about it than I do, and that is like sleep is the most important thing for your health, is it not? I mean, even more
It
so
is.
than if you drink alcohol, like tons, like sleep. If you're deprivation and sleep, that's not good
It
because
really
it
affects
affects so
everything
many
because
things. Yeah,
yeah, and it affects your digestive system. You're at higher risk of cancer. You're at higher risk of a lot of cholesterol and high blood sugar and even if you do eat all the right foods and you don't drink alcohol and you don't do any drugs and everything, you're not sleeping well. It, all that is wasted.
right. Right. And I mean, is that something that maybe your patients look to when they're going to shop, at Stillwater in like for sleep, right? CBN you mentioned is a good alternative for that. I mean, what types of consumers are coming in and how is CBD and other minor cannabinoid products helping them?
Well, I love that. I love who my customer base has become. My customer base mainly is um, I don't want to say older folks. They're probably 50s, 40s to and up. And they're just done with all of the farms that they've been prescribed and the side effects and makes their stomach hurt or it does this or it does that or they have to take this one medicine for this, and then they have to take this other medicine to deal with the side effects of that one, and they're just over it. And they're
Right.
like, "Can I just please try this?" And I'm like, "Of course," you know. And I have the CBN one that is helpful for sleep, and I also have one that if they are needing to pass a drug test, I have one that's a CBD and melatonin. Um, I have a very low dose of melatonin in my tincture because our bodies are just not, our brains are not made to process as much melatonin as people are. Like, you can get a 5 milligram gummy right now, people are popping 3 or 4 of them, but our brains just can't process that much. They really are only supposed to process a
And
little too much.
melatonin's a hormone, isn't it? I mean,
It
like,
is. It's a hormone, and we do produce it. And it's funny, if your body will kind of get used to what your clock is like and what you usually do. We call that your circadian rhythm. And so about an hour before you normally go to bed, you'll get kind of an energetic burst of energy. And and that's usually because we're like tidying things up and we're getting everything buttoned down so that we can go to bed and not be eaten by bears or whatever in Montana. Um, then your body, it produces it's melatonin. You kind of get tired, but there's a window. And if you don't lay down and close your eyes in the dark when your melatonin is active, you miss your window, and then you get your second wind.
oh my
And
gosh.
everybody's like, "Oh, I got my second wind." No, you didn't. You didn't get your second wind. You missed your window. Now you're going to be up all night. Great, congratulations.
I I have used that word with my wife. I have a window. And I didn't know any of this, but like naturally, inherently, like when I, like you said, when that melatonin is starting to produce and I'm getting kind of sleepy, I need all the lights off. I need, because I know that I have a window. And if I miss that window, and I've missed it before, I'm up. I'm up for
Right?
a couple of hours and whatnot. Yeah. So
Yeah,
there's
at least.
it sounds like there's needs to be some type of discipline in the routine as well to really make sure
Yep.
that you're capitalizing, right?
Exactly. And it's so funny. It's consistency is key, and that applies to just about everything in our lives. When you're going to take your CBD, you got to take it consistently. If you're going to when you're raising your kids, you got to be consistent. If you are trying to get your circadian rhythm under control, you have to be consistent. And cons- it will happen. It will happen. I, my entire life, have been one of these people who is awake all night. I never go to bed before 1 or 2. I'm just always doing whatever. And then I'm sleeping until 10 or 11. That just
Right.
was how it was. Well, that doesn't really work for like being a CEO. And
Raising
I
a
would see
15-year
people,
old, right?
right?
Yeah.
And I got 3 kids, and now I have a grandbaby, and I'm like, okay, I need to like be awake during the day and asleep during the night. So I was able to shift my circadian rhythm, and it didn't take as long as I thought. It probably took about 2 weeks. I thought it would take like 4 months, but I was very wrong. Um, I went in bed at 8 o'clock. And you ask any of my family members, if it becomes 8 o'clock and I'm like, I'm turning into a pumpkin, I gotta go. I'm a pumpkin. And in bed at 8, asleep by 9, awake at 4. Easy. I
Wow.
do that very regularly. And if I get off that schedule, I'm not a very nice person to be around. And I'm very forgetful, and I just can't remember things, and I lose my words, and it's not fun. So
Sure.
if I'm consistent, and I don't get into a good part of my show and say, "Oh, no, I'm just going to watch more and more episodes." Mm-mm. If I do that, I'm going to be wrecked. So it is
Discipline.
discipline and consistency.
Consistency is so. Yeah. I'm so glad you brought that up. It is so important, and like you mentioned, I couldn't agree more. It falls into every aspect of our life. Like really, consistency
Right,
is what really propels you forward. And routines hard, right? People. I mean, there's people that aren't wired for routines, and I get that. But
right.
you got to make yourself do it. You got to get into some type of rhythm. So that you know what I mean, you get into that mode, you get consistency, and things
Mhm.
start to happen that are positive. You know, it's not the
Right.
same of what you've known in the past.
Right.
Great points. Yeah, yeah. And I've heard also, to kind of wrap this part up, not eating or drinking 2 hours before bed. So cut off
Right.
the snacking, cut off the, because that food needs time to digest, and that could be another factor of keeping you up at night,
Yeah.
right? Because your
Yeah.
stomach's gurgling or talking to you
Right.
or whatever it is.
Yeah. If you're overeating or under eating or whatever, and if you have to have some, if you gotta have something to eat before you go to bed because like you just got home, just not a lot of carbs because carbs they're processed into sugar, and then sugar gets us all wired, and it's not very conducive for good sleep. Even though people are usually associate like a big plate of carbs, like mashed potatoes or something, it always just makes us so tired, like at Thanksgiving. But it's not really giving us good sleep. It's just making us sluggish and miserable.
Right, right. Like think about when you go, like if you had ever had an office job and you go to lunch with your team and you have like a huge sandwich that's like
Yeah,
bread, right? Like
all
you're
bread.
you're you're tired, right? When you get back to your desk, you're like falling
Uh,
asleep and you're getting ready for that next meeting. And yeah,
yeah.
um,
And
totally,
nobody's
totally.
productive in that meeting. Everybody's like, "Are we really supposed to be here?"
Well, those meetings are the meetings about the meetings, so that
Right.
they're usually never productive. Well, Melly, let's switch gears and talk about, Stillwater, and talk about the business side of it. I mean, from what I've read, you've been an entrepreneur in the past, so that's nothing new to you. What has your entrepreneur journey like been since entering the hemp industry, and yeah, what have you learned thus far?
Very different. Very different because you so many limitations. Advertising, banking, card processing. Uh, what else? So many. I said in a different publication that if I had known beforehand the difficulties, I may not have started the company. But being in it and experiencing it, um, I would not have it any other way. I would never, I wouldn't be happier doing anything else. Um, I love learning more. I love overcoming things. The first time Facebook shut down my ad account, I was like, I thought I was going to be ruined, right? But immediately, I learned how to pivot way before COVID, and
Right.
it made it so that when COVID happened, pivoting was second nature. I was like, oh, all right, and I just
Well, I'm gonna pause you. What was the post that did you in for Facebook?
oh gosh, that time.
I know, right? Because it happens to every person in the industry almost
Yeah.
every day. It's
Yeah,
ridiculous. Yeah.
and my Stillwater Hemp Facebook page will never will it that one's just completely banned forever. I mean, I'm allowed to post, but I'll never be able to advertise. I'll never be able to boost post, and I don't even
Just
care
you just
anymore.
got to create
Because,
a new ad account. I can help you with
right,
that down the road. Yeah, it's easy.
right. So,
Yeah.
but that's when I went on the radio, and I had another friend that I was working with in a different ad aspect, and then she moved over to TV, and so she put me on a TV commercial, and she made me the big sky expert, and so I went into other ad avenues that ended up being a lot more profitable, and now I'm like, okay, fine. You don't want to let me advertise? Fine. I can spend my ad dollars somewhere else. And I don't,
Right.
yeah, I can do this without Facebook. At first, I did not think I could do it without Facebook, but you can totally do it without Facebook.
Yeah, Facebook is becoming, I mean, it has for a while, but it's pretty lame platform, to be honest with you.
Yeah.
And like they're getting so restrictive, like Instagram and Facebook. Of course, Facebook owns Instagram,
Right.
but it's going to get to a point where people are like, I don't even care anymore, really. Like, you know what I mean? And there's
Right.
so many other social media channels, I feel like, that they're just gonna flee from those, and it's just gonna be an echo chamber of whatever those platforms want you to say and do, because
Exactly.
there's really no free thought or like free communication in there anymore at all. I mean, I've gotten,
No.
flagged several times just posting like regular videos. I posted in the 1 year anniversary when Biden announced that we were leaving, was it Afghanistan? And the war was over. Like that video of the equipment and everything there and the people, I just posted that video and put the title, 1 year ago, and they flagged
Right.
it and said it was against their terms. And I literally was like, my account right now is still like restricted for 20 some day, or like, it's just so
Facebook jail.
ridiculous. But
Facebook jail.
yeah.
Well, it's gone to the point where, so I have another account that is associated with a totally different website. It's called All Natural Topicals, because Facebook came out and said, well, okay, you can do topicals, but only if we like you. You can do topicals. So we created this Facebook topicals page, and it doesn't go to stillwaterhemp.com. It goes to allnaturaltopicals.com, and they totally flagged me. And my digital marketing guys were like, "What are you flagging?" They have the concierge access, and so they're talking to actual employees at Facebook who are also saying, "We don't know."
And that's rare. To talk to somebody at Facebook
I
is
know.
super, if you don't have a big budget, that's like rare. So
No.
you're lucky with that, even. Yeah.
Well, and the only reason why it's because they bundle, they represent many companies, and so they are able to be good enough in Facebook size to talk to a person. But even their staff was like, we don't even know what's wrong with this thing. And he says, it could be that they figured out that you're also Stillwater Hemp. And I said, yeah, but who cares? I am following all of the guidelines on allnaturaltopicals.com.
It's a
So
whole
now what
separate
they're doing,
entity.
it's
Yeah.
a total separate entity. And so why now they're going to decide whether or not they approve of my lifestyle, right? If they approve of other things that I do. What if I am beating my kids? What if I am a drunk who drives drunk every day and crashes and kills somebody? Are they going to know about that and close my business account down because no, I wasn't violating their standards, but okay. It's so frustrating, and
It really is.
I could go
I
on all day and I'll stop.
I know that could be a whole separate like podcast discussion because, like I
Yeah,
said, it's every day, and it's so random. You never know. They never give you a reason. Even with the flagging of like the COVID fact checks, like everything was so broad. It was like, wait, what? Like,
yeah,
nothing was very specific. And I mean, you it's not just, it can't just be the algorithm, because like if it's AI and machine learning, there needs to be human intervention to like train those machines to do that.
right.
So it is the people within these platforms that are doing this, and as we know, it's come to a head, right? I mean,
Yeah,
everyone's sick of it,
and
even outside of the cannabis community. It's getting
oh
really,
yeah, it's
yeah,
getting awful.
yeah, absolutely.
And
So
people are putting
tell
badges now on their profiles about how long they've been in Facebook jail.
Oh, are they? I haven't seen that. That's so funny. Like
Repeat
it's like a
offenders.
badge of
Yeah,
honor, right? Like, yeah.
yeah.
Well, tell me. So like there's going to be an audience that's listening and watching and that's interested maybe in CBD because of the fact that, nationwide hemp products are legal to sell. So, what advice would you give some people that are thinking about entering the industry? You said initially that if you knew some of the challenges, you might have went a different way. So like tell us, like, what should people expect, and what would your advice be?
Well, first of all, the business has changed a lot in 5 years. Um, to some extent, it's gotten easier. To some extent, it's gotten more difficult. Um, on on one hand, 5 years ago, nobody knew what it was, so they didn't have any policies against working with cannabis companies, right? Um, and now a lot of people, like I was looking for a preservative and a food safe preservative, and I located this company that had a great product and I was discussing it with them. And they said, first, before we have a discussion, are you working with CBD or THC? And I said, yeah, I'm working with CBD, but I don't have any THC in my product. And they said, oh, well, I really would like to work with you, but our company has this policy. And I said, but I have labs. I have all my labs on my website that show, I
COAs,
can,
yeah.
and he's like, sorry, you're in the cannabis industry. Um, so you have to, if you're going to go into CBD, you have to be diligent. You have to really not give a
Give a
crap
fuck.
about what anybody else thinks.
Right.
And you have to be very headstrong because you're gonna have to fight your way through this. One of the things that I'm doing to fight our way through this is my association. I have established a CBD Distributors Association. This and on my through my webpage, we're sort of a beginning. We're just in the beginning, and I will be trying, at least trying to drum up some support for a, a differentiation. Now I want to make very clear that I have no negative opinion or feelings about marijuana or THC because there's tons of great benefit there.
Right.
However, it's not part of the farm bill that made it legal for cannabinoids to be cannabinoids, to be federally legal and across state lines. And now federal funds can be used to research it and stuff. So I would be very interested in differentiating between the cannabis industry and the cannabinoid industry because I feel like CBD companies are they're very much under the constraints of the cannabis laws, even though they're not subject to the cannabis laws. Do you know what I mean?
Mm-hmm.
And so this is something that I'm working on is sort of figuring out how to unite the hemp industry behind becoming a hemp industry and not disassociating, but just defining themselves as here's where they are. I'm also totally for the feds just letting go of this whole marijuana thing because I mean at this point I'm really honestly surprised that it hasn't been legalized nationally at this point.
Well, the
However,
people that are lobbying against cannabis are the same people that told you that opioids were not addictive. So,
oh,
uh,
don't even get me started.
so there's a
Oh,
reason why,
yeah,
Democrat or
there's a lot of money
Republican,
there.
yeah, there's a
Yeah,
lot of money and there's a lot of good that it does for the people that may not need to be prescribed multiple different prescriptions and other. I'm not saying it's the end all be all, but I'm sure it would alleviate a lot of symptoms that people have that are currently on other medications, right? So,
right.
uh,
And the opioid epidemic, in my opinion, and I might lose friends over this, but I don't even care. The opioid epidemic, the cause of that falls squarely on the pharmaceutical industry because
100%. Yeah.
for one, when our soldiers came back from Iraq and Afghanistan and they went to the VA and they were like, this hurts and that hurts, Vicodin, codeine, oxycodone, opioid. And then their body builds up a tolerance and they're like, I need more, I need more, I need more. And then doctor's like, oh, I think you're addicted. We're cutting you off. Oh my gosh, I'm cut off. I'm a
And then
drug addict
heroin,
now.
right?
And I'm going to heroin. And now I'm
Yep.
going to fentanyl. And now we
Yep.
have a fentanyl pandemic. Excuse me, I want to know who's going to hold those people responsible. Nobody. They got too much money. And the same people who are responsible for doing that, like you said, are the ones who are saying, oh no, you can't use CBD. It's not safe. It's not
Right.
safe.
It's right. It's right in our face, right? I mean, it's clear as day, and it's so obvious. This with the transparency of communication these days, and looking and seeing where the money's coming from, and it's I mean, it's clear. It's clear. And I would also argue to take it a step further. that this administration, while they did commit and promise to decriminalization and expunging records and rescheduling, not descheduling, which is a terrible idea. They should deschedule, definitely not
Reschedule.
reschedule.
Yeah.
Um, he hasn't. They haven't made a move yet, and there's
No.
there's a reason why. I mean, the Biden has been known to be in the pocket of the pharmaceutical industry. We've known
For
and
sure.
heard of that, right? So,
Right.
um, although I have said this on Twitter, my prediction is this administration's final Hail Mary attempt is going to be decrim and rescheduling, which is going to throw a wrench into. It's going to do more, probably not more
Harm
harm
them
than
good.
good, but it's going to not be the best option to go about rolling this out. And
I think it'll be more confusion.
yeah, exactly, right. Well, and speaking of confusion, so I want to go back to your point about the not using the word separation. I guess it is separation, but it's more of like, defining the different industries, hemp and cannabis. I
Mhm.
totally get that, and I see where you're coming from, and I understand it. And I don't. It's not that I disagree or agree. I'm curious as to what you think will happen if and when cannabis is legalized, because like it seems like right now is the perfect time to really set that distinction, right? Because
Right.
they are so black and white, and we know that hemp's legal in 50 states and cannabis is not. So
Right.
if legalization hits, do you think that that's going to do more harm than good in terms of understanding the differentiation between the two?
Well, I feel like it's good to understand the difference for the consumer. One, because they have, they both have, they all have benefits. All the cannabinoids have benefits, and the endocannabinoid system interacts with all of the cannabinoids. Um, some, and I don't know if this is just because I'm in Montana and we're a more of a conservative state. Which, uh, speaking of conservatism and irony, our state in the last election legalized recreational marijuana, and also filled all of the seats with Republicans.
Wow.
How does that make sense? So then,
Can those Montana Republicans come talk to the Texas Republicans?
right? I know. And so we passed recreational, and then some of the people were like, "Oh, I don't think that was really real. So we need to vote again." So they had another vote, and it passed by
What?
even more. Yeah. So
That's some
um,
shady stuff right there that they would
it's
call another
crazy.
vote. Yeah.
So it was really crazy. But now I forgot what I was saying. I forgot why I went there. Oh, is it going to do more harm than good? I think for the consumer, it still needs to be defined. What is what, and what does what, and which things are THC going to help you with, because it does help with uh CBG can help you with the cell proliferation situation with your cancer cells, especially in like breast cancer or colon cancer, prostate cancer. Um, but THC, yeah, that's great, but THC will help you. You're going through chemo, and you can't eat, and everything's shaking, and you're turning pale as a ghost. And if you can use THC along with that, you can eat food, you can sleep at night, your fingertips and toes aren't burning on fire, because you are able to use THC to combat those kinds of side effects. Because chemotherapy is basically they're poisoning you right up until the point of death to hopefully kill the cancer before they kill you. And and I mean, okay,
Yeah. It's
but
it's crazy. Yeah.
but
I've
we
had
it
I've
doesn't
had
have to
Cody.
be
I've
that.
had a guy named Cody Guy on, and he's a brain cancer survivor. And when he talks about chemo, he's like, it's the craziest concept. Like how you just explained it, he went through it. And it's like it's insane that they put that amount of toxicness in your body to kill one section off, right, and put everything else at risk. I'm just floored that that's still all we've got in terms of men and You know, like
But
it's pretty wild to think about.
um, it's crazy. And I have a good friend here in town who was recently diagnosed with breast cancer, and then they found out that not only does she have breast cancer, but she's got mesothelioma right alongside of it. So she's doing a lot of stuff that is just severe. And for when she comes home, for 3 days after she comes home from her chemo treatment, she's got two young sons and a husband, and they have to be very, very careful and wear rubber gloves. And she has to wear rubber gloves and sleep in a different bedroom for a couple of days because those toxins come out of your pores. And when you touch a surface around your house, you are getting those toxins on that surface. And then your 7-year-old boy comes by and touches it. And after a period of time of him doing that, he can be affected by that. So, how
Wow.
I see your point. Like, what is that really all we have still? This is 2022, and that's really all we have. I'm a little skeptical about that, but I mean,
I am
this
too.
she's going through this so that she can live long enough to raise her boys,
Right.
but at the same time doing it is risking her boys. It's so it just seems like it's a rock and a hard place. It's catch 22. We don't It's hard. It's really
Right.
hard.
Right. Well, it's a blessing that, I mean, it's a blessing that hemp is legal in this country and that people have more availability and access to CBD products or minor cannabinoid products, especially the ones like what Stillwater Hemp is producing, right, or is selling. So, um, I it's sad, but it seems like small progress is being made. And like we talked about earlier, the industry
Yeah.
is really the ones that are pushing that forward because
Right.
we know the value and we see the benefits and we see the innovation even. I mean, we didn't even talk about the potential that hemp presents in terms of material goods and
Oh
you know
gosh, that's a whole nother.
houses and
Yeah.
plastic, I mean cars,
Hempcrete and
and
plastic
it's
and
the list
so many
goes on
things.
and on, right? And
Fibers. Yeah.
yeah, and it's really, Melanie, I think what it comes down to is it's conversations like this where, experts like you who are in the actual industry, operators who
Mhm.
can talk about it and educate, others. Because
Mhm.
I know that there's still a lot of people out there that don't really fully understand the full potential of the cannabis plant or hemp plant, whatever you want to call it. You know,
Whatever
uh,
you want to call it.
it's endless.
It's endless, and there are so many possibilities with hemp as a fibrous plant, and it's a sustainable crop. And you can, if you make hemp paper, it's just as good as wood paper, uh, but it grows in a year. You just let it grow for season.
or 3 months in just one I mean, if you
Right.
depending on where you live, you could get three harvests in a year as opposed to waiting how many years for to cut down a tree,
For a
right?
tree, right?
Yeah.
And it does the whole replenish the soil thing. It's really great crop to use in rotation alongside other crops to make sure that you've got all your nitrogens and stuff like that in there. And the problem with the hemp industry, unfortunately, there is still some inner bickering, like, oh, fiber is better than CBD or whatever. That just is, I think, will work itself out. But um, there's hempcrete, they can build houses out of it. Um, there are other industries in our country, major industries, clothing industries, uh, animal feed companies
Hmm.
that are ready to make the switch over to hemp instead of cotton or polyester or whatever. Um, but the hemp industry can't provide the supply.
It's the infrastructure is not in place, right? The
Exactly.
processing, the decortication,
Right.
that's what I've heard, is that, I mean, that costs a lot of money to put those plants up, a lot of
Oh,
investment, and
yeah.
And is that the reason why, like, I mean, you can go to specialty shops and you'll see hemp clothes, right? But they're typically pretty expensive. And I think the reason for that is because the infrastructure is not in place. So it costs more for the producer to kind of get it produced,
Yeah,
right?
yeah. And also, I think when the 18 Farm Bill came out, everybody saw dollar signs and started growing hemp for CBD. And they were like, "Oh, I'm gonna make $10,000 an acre, and I'm gonna sell all the CBD, and then I'm finally not gonna be a poor rancher anymore, and I'm not gonna struggle." And everybody was in it for CBD. Well, that's great, but we also need other parts of the infrastructure. We need processing, we need extraction, we need fiber, we need all of the varieties of hemp so that we can utilize all of the potential of hemp, because
Hmm.
everybody talks about being sustainable, and we don't
Right.
have to go halfway
And
around the
climate
world.
change, right? We talk about climate
Yeah,
change every day. Well, let's
yeah.
start
And
growing
how
hemp
much
all over the world.
how much I mean, it is a cannabis plant, and the cannabis is called weed for a reason, because it grows like a weed. You can toss the seed out the window on the side of the road and you come back and there's a pot plant growing right there. It's it seems like such a no-brainer for those of us who have taken the time to learn about it. Um, I feel there just needs to be a paradigm shift in the mindset of hemp is bad, cannabis is bad, pot is bad, 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 bad. We
We've
need
been lied
to
to.
we need to shift that big time.
Yep. I totally agree, Melanie. And conversations like these are going to slowly kind of move the needle. And that's all we can do. Every day is a new day where we provide information and do it to the best of our ability. And I've really, really enjoyed our conversation today. I really learned a lot, and I'm sure that the audience did as well. Is there anything that you want to leave them with before we wrap up?
Oh gosh, do your research. Look into this stuff for yourself. You can there is a lot more information available now than there was 4 or 5 years ago. And even like on YouTube, there's like whole courses that are free that you can watch and learn all about processing and growing and different kinds of plants. There's so much information out there. Just go and look at it, and listen to us, but also, you know, take what we've said and put it next to what the every, all the rest of the information in the studies are saying, because people would be blown away. They'll be mind blown when they start to actually read and learn. And go look. You'll find it. You'll be blown away.
Hmm. Couldn't agree more. Yeah, do your own research, fact check us, do it all. But I really enjoyed this again, Melanie. Thank you so much. Where can people find y'all's website and social media if they want to learn more about Stillwater Hemp?
So my website, stillwaterhemp.com. My Facebook is um, Stillwater Hemp, as is my Instagram. I'm on LinkedIn as Melanie Kossan. If you just Google Melanie Kossan, all of my stuff comes up. So
Perfect.
if you just do that, and I've really enjoyed it too. This has been one of my favorite conversations.
Awesome. I appreciate you saying that. And I'll be sure to put the links to all the ones that you mentioned in the YouTube description box so that people can find them there. Well, thank you so much again, Melanie. It was a pleasure. And thank you all for listening. Bye.
Bye bye.